Welcome to our series on repository basics in user research. Today I'm going to show you what traceability in the context of a repository is. In general, a trace is a small but important piece of information to follow if you want to get behind something. So if you have a series of traces, you will end up with a trail or a path to the origin of what you are looking for. That's why these terms are often used instead. In user research, traceability is an important part of documentation and reasoning too. It helps us to backtrack a decision, a learning, an insight, or even a single quote to the source. I'll explain some use cases later on to show you the importance. User research works the other way around in the typical process. You screen or record the raw data and take with you the important bits and pieces of feedback that are important for your report through analysis, sense making and reporting. And in the end, you have those bits of evidence in your report to support your statements. But can you trace them back to the sources? Can others trace them back? Can you trace them back in 3 months? So this kind of connection and link is important for research to keep its comprehensibility and have a proper structure. So the Atomic UX research model, where you can find several videos on this channel, is a good example of how to structure this knowledge in a framework. Because in the end, it's about having evidence for your research. I already mentioned that traceability is familiar to the process of analysis done in the first place. And that's where repositories come into play. So if you have a well-structured repository and use a framework like the Atomic UX research, you will build up those links to trace back during your regular analysis and later on can utilize them. So, as a short example from our repository Considerly, you have this link between insights and notes. So if I open an insight, I can see all the supporting evidence as quotes from different interviews or other sources. So traceability here is the option to use this link to jump directly to the right position in the raw data and see its context. Sounds easy? But you can imagine a typical PDF or a PowerPoint report with isolated quotes. There is no chance to efficiently get to the source, if ever possible. So how can you benefit from having such a level of traceability? I show you now a few use cases where our users can use the link for their research activities. So, in the first case, during your presentation or handover of your results, you can prove the validity of the data and raise the credibility of your findings by having all the evidence and context only a click away. So if there are any queries, you can show the data on the spot and rule out any doubts. As a second very popular use case, it allows other colleagues and researchers to dig deeper into your findings for their own research. And they have a proper entry point. So this is especially helpful in follow-up studies or if you are in bigger companies. The third use case is a more long-term benefit. So for example, if you have to do a redesign or a re-evaluation in research, you can go through major insights from the past and revisit the interviews and highlights that have led to the insight. Based on several dimensions, you can now evaluate whether those contexts are still valid and thus whether the insight is still relevant today. And at last, because it's not that frequent, it's good to check what turned out to be wrong. So if an insight turns out to be wrong, it's easy to get to the highlights and see whether something was neglected during the analysis, which led to the wrong conclusion. So what a great opportunity to learn from as a research team. So far from my side about the topic of traceability. If there are any specific questions left, don't hesitate to contact me. For other basic topics about repositories, check out our repository basics playlist and further videos on this topic. See you there.